All right, so I talked about the position of the CNA. I talked about the position of the CMA, referenced the case in Halifax, circled back to my own riding, circled back to my wife's commentary and what she was subjected to. I'm now returning to some other publications that I was able to research. And this is titled, Workplace Violence Against Nurses in Canada, a Legal Analysis. Workplace violence against nurses is a significant global occupational health problem. Not just Canada, not just North America, this is happening around the world. Widely acknowledged in the academic and policy literature. Nurses experience intimidation, threats, and violence far too often in the course of their employment. A recent survey by 4 international health organizations found that violence against healthcare workers has been occurring at a higher frequency since the COVID-19 pandemic began in 2020, and that it happens all over the world. Workplace violence is a major concern for nurses in Canada and has received increasing attention from Canadian nursing organizations and government stakeholders. That would be the British Columbia Nurses Union, the Canadian Federation of Nurses Union, the CNA, the Canadian Nurses Association, the Government of Canada in 2021, and the Registered Nurses Association of Ontario, also known as RNAO. The full extent of workplace violence against nurses in Canada is difficult to determine due to pervasive underreporting, the lack of a consistent definition of workplace violence across studies and policy documents, and a lack of recent comprehensive Canadian data on the issue. Although now over a decade and a half old, the most recent comprehensive examination of the Canadian nursing workforce took place in 2005. That data revealed that almost 30% of nurses providing direct care reported having been physically assaulted at work within the past year, and 44% reported emotional abuse from a patient. According to StatsCan in 2006, that's data from StatsCan, sorry. A national survey of nurses found in 2017 that 61% of nurses had experienced workplace violence over the previous month, and 2/3 of those had considered leaving their jobs due to the experience. We already have a shortage of healthcare workers. Let not Canada be forever known as the outlier who fails to pass the appropriate legislation and then seeing even a further drain of our healthcare professionals because the Government of Canada is not doing enough. A 2019 survey by the CFNU found that 93% of nurses reported physical assault as the most frequent type of psychologically traumatic event exposure, with 46% of surveyed nurses reporting exposure to physical assault 11 or more times. Workplace violence against nurses can have serious consequences both for individual nurses and for the healthcare system. The experience of workplace violence may result in physical injury and psychological consequences for an individual nurse and may result in short or long-term absences from work. The results of the 2019 National Survey of Nurses on Occupational Stress found that workplace violence can have serious impacts on nurses' mental health, including post-traumatic stress, major depressive incidents, generalized anxiety, panic, and alcohol use disorders with the potential for suicidal ideation and attempt. They compiled a list of cases. Now this was, mind you, this was before the passage of C3, which provided as an aggravating factor assaults against healthcare workers to be an aggravating factor. but they compiled the 12 most leading cases at that time. They do not provide the area of jurisdiction. They don't provide the court of jurisdiction, and they certainly do not provide the province. But I wish to read out a few of these cases. Regina versus Galanzoski from 2006. That offender pled guilty to assault. He was seeking medical attention following an assault on a police officer. He was restrained and spit on the nurse caring for him after telling healthcare staff that they were positive for Hep C. What was the victim on that particular nurse? The nurse reported feeling traumatized and was in fear of having contracted Hep C for a year before being confirmed negative for the virus. The nurse reported that the incident interfered with their ability to do their work as a nurse. On the column heading sentencing decision, the offender's last conviction was in 1990, and he was remorseful. The offender was sentenced to 90 days in prison for the assault on the nurse. Discussion of the victim being a nurse on sentencing, no discussion, but the judge did consider the pervasiveness of violence against healthcare workers by placing emphasis on the sentencing objective of denunciation. Police and healthcare workers are on the front lines. The message that the law will not tolerate the type of behavior that the offender has demonstrated must be sent. Moving on to 2009, the decision of Regina versus Knight. Knight was found guilty after trial for publishing defamatory libel. He sent a letter to the Medical Ethics Committee falsely accusing a nurse, which happened to be his ex-spouse, of allegations including drug trafficking. The impact on that nurse. The nurse reported being angered by the false allegation. Under sentencing, Knight had a long criminal record, and it was not his first offense against this victim. He was sentenced to a 15-month house arrest sentence to be served in the community. The Court of Appeal changed the sentence to be served in jail, finding Knight posed a danger to the community. Discussion of the victim on sentencing. No discussion. The judge remarked, however, the innocent victim is entitled to pursue her life and her profession in peace, free from false accusations that require her to defend herself and her reputation. A little more recent, 2016, Regina versus Stard. Stard pled guilty to assault causing bodily harm. He was seeking health care and became uncooperative. When the triage nurse turned away, Stard repeatedly punched the nurse without warning or provocation. The nurse suffered a concussion, torn retina, and bleeding in the eye socket. The nurse suffered PTSD and experienced difficulty with memory, balance, and focusing. The victim's personality had become unpredictable and often angry. The nurse was unable to return to work. Sentencing decision. Stard had no criminal record and was apologetic. He received a conditional discharge, meaning he did not have a conviction entered against him or serve time in prison, which, in my view, as a former prosecutor, that is deplorable, that a judge under that extreme level of violence would deem that to be in the public interest. Discussion of victim being a nurse on sentencing. The victim's status as a nurse was not found to be aggravating. The judge commented, people that provide service to the public, and this would include taxi drivers, bus drivers, nurses, doctors, are in a position where they should be free from attack while doing their job. 2018, the decision of Regina versus Delorei. Delorei was found guilty after trial for assault with a weapon. He threw a cup of urine at a nurse, and I often hear about urine throwing and feces on a fairly regular and consistent basis every time that I take a stakeholder meeting with that profession. Impact on the nurse, no information was provided regarding the impacts on the nurse. Delorei was already serving a life sentence in a federal prison at the time of the assault and was sentenced to a further 12 months in prison, served concurrently with his ongoing sentence. Regina versus Martin. It was a Court of Appeal decision in 2018 varying the trial decision of 2017. Martin pled guilty to assault. He was a certified involuntary patient at a psychiatric hospital and was assaulting a nurse student when a nurse intervened. He grabbed the nurse by the face and hair, shaking and scratching the nurse's face. Again, no victim impact statement done by the nurse.